Will President Trump eliminate the Iranian Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei as early as this week? The United States continues building military power facing Iran while sending contradictory messages. And against the backdrop of tensions with Iran, the Pentagon is expected to send additional military assets to the Middle East in the coming days, as despite changes in Trump's statements regarding an attack on Iran, it appears that this is an attempt to buy time in order to bring as many strike capability as possible into this region in order to set the stage for a lethal blow. Welcome to Boots on the Ground. I'm your host, Yair Pinto, bringing you the whole truth about what's happening in Israel. Sharp verbal blows are being exchanged between Iran's supreme leader and the American president, even as President Trump thanked the leadership in Tehran for canceling 800 planned executions. Khamenei attacked him and accused the United States thought to bring Iran back under its military, political, and economic control. And the United States State Department then published a response in Persian saying, "Don't play games with President Trump. All options are on the table." Trump also said, "We need to find new leadership in Iran." He also called Khamenei a sick man and said Iran is the worst place in the world to live because of inferior leadership. However, behind the scenes, it appears that Israel called on the United States President Donald Trump not to strike Iran and warned that it is not fully prepared to absorb Iranian retaliation without strong American military backing. Did Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu personally call President Trump to press for restraint? Meanwhile, there were reports on Sunday of a very limited return of the internet all across Iran after 200 hours of disconnection. However, the Ayatollah regime plans to turn the country's internet shutdown into a permanent matter, so that it became a privilege reserved only for regime insiders and elite few. However, right now, testimonies are beginning to emerge from Iran, and it seems that this time the regime crossed the line and carried out a terrible massacre over the last weekend. TBN Israel's senior Middle East analyst Mati Shoshani will bring us the full picture of where the wind is blowing in the Middle East. And meanwhile, in the Gaza Strip, the IDF closed a 30-year account over the weekend as 3 senior figures in Hamas and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad terrorist organizations and 2 additional terrorists were eliminated in response to the counter that took place last week in Rafah. In a related story, Israel issued an ultimatum for progress to Phase B of the ceasefire plan and the establishment of the Peace Council in Gaza. The Hamas terrorist organization now has 2 months to disarm, or the IDF will move in to finish the job. And furthermore, President Trump is expected to present the Peace Council in Davos, Switzerland, next week, as Israeli officials emphasized that the ultimatum is being presented in full coordination with the United States, and it was also agreed that the method of demilitarization and the criteria for carrying it out will be defined. The military is already preparing for the scenario of renewed offensive options, as President Trump repeated that they can do it with the easy way or the hard way. And in the northern arena, alertness against Hezbollah in Lebanon is also rising, as Israeli activity in southern Lebanon puts Hezbollah under double pressure, including military strikes on the one hand and waiting for developments in the contacts between Washington and Tehran on the other. And amidst these developments, Hezbollah leader Naim Qassem gave a statement to Iranian state television over the weekend in which he repeated the terrorist organization's refusal to disarm, claiming that the weapons are meant to protect the Lebanese people and saying, "We will not surrender, we will not accept the continuation of strikes in the country. A limit must be set." And following Khamenei's example, Qassem also accused the United States of being responsible for the recent violence in Iran, declaring that Trump wants to stop Islamic and free life. So we have a lot to talk about today, so let's dive into the details. I'm Yair Pinto, and this is your Boots on the Ground report, bringing you the whole truth about what's happening in Israel on day 834 of the war against Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis in Yemen, the Shia militias in Iraq, and all the other armed groups in this region that are operating under the orders of Iran's Revolutionary Guards, which is the head of the crumbling axis of evil in the Middle East. And a moment before we begin, I have a brief comment to make about what we've just seen in Iran. The Revolutionary Guards are embodiment of human evil, the worst possible regime for the Iranian people to be living under. Freeing Iran from this evil regime won't be simple or easy, but it will have many positive benefits for the entire region, including for Israel. And here at Boots on the Ground, we are here to bring you the whole truth and to help you get the most up-to-date information day by day on what's happening in Israel and in the Middle East. So help us spread the truth and share our content with as many people as possible. Now, let's start with the latest from Iran, because after more than 200 hours of an almost total shutdown, the internet connections began to be restored early Sunday morning, but just barely. According to the International Network Traffic Monitoring, connectivity is at an only 2% of normal. This is not a return to routine. It's just a phase that opened it a little bit, exactly so that the regime can say that things have calmed down, but on the ground, it looks like the quiet is based on fear. So we can see that whoever controls access to the internet controls the protests and isolating city from city, family for family, and erasing evidence in real time. Over this weekend in Iran, that's exactly what we saw: repression, disconnection, and moving the country into a state of internal emergency. To review, the latest wave of protests began on January 8 in northern Tehran, with hundreds of protesters facing security forces chanting slogans about economic issues and mostly staying away from the political issues. But things quickly escalated, and soon violent clashes were breaking out, with security forces using tear gas and also rubber bullets to try and contain them. But that soon escalated as well, with police using live fire munitions, and soon the streets were filled with blood amidst violent clashes that included arson attacks on police stations and on mosques. Human rights organizations spoke of thousands of fatalities and tens of thousands of arrests, with some estimates of both ranging much higher. We'll probably never know the actual numbers, but we can assume that the higher numbers are the truth ones. However, the regime is trying to prove that it is in control. Media outlets identified with the regime claim that the riots have died down and that they were the result of intelligence agents from hostile powers, principally the United States, Britain, and Israel, exploiting the difficult situation and stirring up local hooligans to clash with the security forces of the Islamic Republic. But the eyewitnesses' accounts coming from inside Iran tell something very different. Families are searching for relatives in overcrowded morgues, and according to human rights organizations, bodies are being stored not only in refrigerators but also in trucks, containers, and warehouses. There are reports of payment demands from families to receive bodies for release, a move with one purpose: to prevent a public funeral that would turn into a protest. Also, reports have emerged that after local Iranian security forces began to refuse orders to fire on the protesters, the regime brought in large numbers of Shia militia fighters from neighboring Iraq and even Hezbollah operatives from Lebanon, as well as others, to do this dirty job. And here, the diplomatic campaign comes in, which deteriorated over the weekend into personal threats. Iran's supreme leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei made a fiery speech in which he called President Trump a criminal and accused him of being behind all the violence. Without presenting, of course, any kind of evidence, he also claimed that the United States and Israel incited local hooligans to get violent, adding that they trained the leaders of the rioters abroad. He also spoke about the need to pursue those that defined as criminals, both foreign but also domestic, and made clear that he would not let them escape punishment. For this, we can issue that a massive internal purge of Iranian society is about to take place, and there will be many more funerals moving forward. And President Trump, for his part, sent a completely opposite message. On one hand, he thanked Iran's leaders for what he describes as the cancellation of more than 800 executions that were planned against detainees from the protests. On the other hand, he called to look for new leadership in Iran, calling Khamenei a sick man, but also saying, "I convinced myself not to attack militarily." However, movements of United States military assets into the Middle East have been observed. This includes an aircraft carrier strike group with cruisers and missile destroyers, fighter squadrons, and ground-based air defensive systems. It was reported that 6 American ships are already operating in the area, including 3 missile destroyers. This is no idle threat because although the US military takes time to get into position, once it is ready, there's nothing that can stop it. While all of these military preparations are being made, diplomatic signals are also coming. This, including a post in Persian this week from the Pentagon warning that Iran has all the options on the table. Don't play games with President Donald Trump. This is the warning. And this came in response to reports that the regime in Tehran is preparing options for an attack on American bases. Even a Telegram channel identified with the Revolutionary Guards threatened American officers in Qatar and claimed it identified their transfer from El Ubaida base to the Sheraton Hotel in Doha in Qatar. This is no longer a message to the Iranian people, but a message to the United States Central Command to enter a war posture. But Israel is also paying close attention to all of this because we're in the line of fire if the United States and Iran start firing at each other. And according to media reports in both Israel and the United States, Israel asked Trump to delay an attack because it is not prepared to absorb Iranian retaliation without strong American backing, mainly at sea and in defense against missiles. During Operation Raising Lion in June, US ground and also sea-based air defensive systems shot down a significant number of incoming Iranian missiles, but at this time, these assets are not in place to do the same job once more. And with that in mind, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu personally called Trump last week and pressed for restraint, while the IDF officially announced raising the level of readiness in all arenas and rejected claims of a shortage of Arrow 3 interceptors and emphasized that the air defensive and the systems that protect Israel are on full alert. And amidst all of these kinetic aspects, in this conflict, the Iranian regime is also attempting to turn internet access inside Iran into a privilege that is reserved for supporters of the regime, and even then, most will only get a heavily filtered version. Everyone else will remain with the national internet and internet network disconnected from the rest of the world. So, to sum up, over the weekend, the regime in Iran carried out massive violence against their own people, using Shia militias from Arab countries outside Iran to help them to do it. They also shut down the flow of information both into and out of Iran while carrying out a rhetorical battle with the United States president and making threats to attack Israel and the United States bases in this region. The US military is slowly building up massive offensive power in the region in response to preparations for a strike, while in Israel, we're at a peak alert, using the extra time to prepare as best we can. On that point, everyone is wondering if President Trump is buying time to prepare a crushing blow to the regime, or is he just trying to scare Tehran into folding? That is the question that TBN Israel's senior Middle East analyst Mati Shoshani will examine in just a moment. But first, I want to invite you once again to help us spread the truth by hitting the subscribe button and sharing this video with as many people as possible. Don't miss another episode of Boots on the Ground. I also want to speak to you for just a moment about Meir Panim. They're our partner for this video because war doesn't end when the sirens stop. Families are still rebuilding in Israel. Reservists in the IDF are still serving. Survivors still face long days alone, and children still go to bed hungry. At Meir Panim, they call it Hitchadshut, which means in Hebrew, renewal. It begins quietly, a fridge that hums again, a backpack packed for school, a Holocaust survivor smiling over a hot soup. And over the past year, Meir Panim helped 100,000 displaced families begin rebuilding their lives here in Israel. They served 2.6 million meals, supported over 100,000 IDF soldiers, delivered 500,000 care packages, and renovated hundreds of homes for families and for Holocaust survivors in need. Each meal, each visit, each act of kindness helps restore steady ground, and as the new year begins, you can help give those in need a new beginning. Visit bless-israel.org. Again, that's bless-israel.org and give now. Every donation is tax deductible, and every gift helps bring renewal and hope to the people of Israel. Now we'll move to Mati Shoshani to tell us where this is going on, where is this week taking us, and what is the first sign on the ground that we will know we're reaching a decisive point. Over to you, Mati.
Yair just gave you the facts from inside Iran. A crackdown, a blackout, and a regime trying to look in control while it bleeds legitimacy. My part now is the forward-looking piece. What happens next between the US, Iran, and Israel, and what is real power movement versus just messaging. Because the main story tonight is not the internet. The main story is this: America is positioning force, and when Trump talks like this, history shows he usually doesn't reverse overnight. He creates confusion, he counts days between words, and then he makes a move. So let's map the next week clearly. What Trump is building, what Khamenei is trying to deter, what Israel is trying to survive, and what the first real sign will be that we crossed into a decision point. A serious US move is not a headline, it is logistics. Carrier strike group positioning, combat aircraft, air defenses, search and rescue, refueling, target banks. And when assets start moving, that creates a decision window that is measured in days, not in minutes. And that is exactly what is ahead of us as we speak. My read is this: Trump is not backing away. He's buying time to create a credible option that can actually work. The contradictions are the fog. The military movement is the actual truth, the assets moving on the ground that we've seen in recent days. He wants Tehran to feel that the clock is ticking without giving Tehran a clear date to plan around. And the first sign we reach the decision point is simple: when the US posture shifts from warning to full protection and positioning, meaning America is actively preparing to absorb retaliation, not just threaten it. Now, the sickness of the regime and why Khamenei looks trapped. The Iranian regime's disease is not just protest, it's legitimacy collapse. Khamenei is an aging, suspicious leader running a system built on coercion, and coercion has diminishing returns. The economy is stressed, the street is angrier, the elite is paranoid, and the system relies on security forces to hold the center line. And that's why the regime blames outsiders. It's Israel, it's America, it trained the rioters, because admitting it's an internal issue is admitting weakness. Now, when regimes start importing narrative control and fear, they're managing decay and not solving it. That doesn't guarantee collapse soon, but it creates vulnerability if external pressure hits at exactly the same time. So in the coming week, watch the posture, not the tweets. If protection and positioning accelerate, we are at the decision point. These have been very confusing days. On the one hand, we see the United States, the Trump White House, warning publicly, look, Iran, we're coming, saying to the Iranian people, help is on the way, and then nothing, silence. In fact, more than the silence, we've had some very, very, very surprising headlines. Headlines saying that the attack was delayed because Israel requested that it would be delayed, because Israel has a shortage of defense missiles, perhaps, because the Trump White House received a last-minute phone call or text message from someone in the Iranian government saying, look guys, we're going to stop the public executions, we're going to spare the life of this person or that person, this shopkeeper or that shopkeeper, please hold off the attack. But all this really works into Trump's plan. I want to explain. We've seen similar methodology back in Operation Midnight Hammer or Rising Lion in June, where Israel and the United States attacked Iranian assets in a very, very substantial show of force. We've seen this also in the build-up to the Maduro extraction and attack on Venezuela just a few short weeks ago. And the reason all of this is coming together, the reason we're in this state of limbo, is because this is Trump methodology. This is the MO that he pursues. This is how he's been working. So let's break down the personality approach to this topic and what we can expect the US to do. So first of all, Trump has done this before. The Trump White House has been clear in the past about trying to, one, create confusion and lack of clarity on the enemy's side. So no clear window of opportunity, no clear call to action of we're going to do this when you do that. Just sort of ambiguity that leaves the enemy wondering, is the attack coming in 10 minutes or in 10 days? That's exactly where we are today. Military action against a country like Iran in a substantial and an effective way requires an enormous amount of assets used by the US against the Iranians. And from my understanding, the reason the attack was held off the other day or several days ago over the leading into the weekend is because those assets were not in place. And from what I've heard, the Israeli government, along with several others in this region, namely the Saudis and the UAE, the Emiratis, said clearly to the American government, look, we're not interested in a limited strike. If all you're going to do is poke the Iranian bear and allow him just to launch missiles at every general direction, we're going to suffer from that, and it's not going to change anything substantial for the people on the ground in Iran. So if you want to do something, we'll do something substantial, do something that's final, do something that will bring down the regime. And that's what we're leading up to now. Again, I want to remind you that President Trump said to the Iranian people repeatedly, help is on the way. He warned Khamenei, he warned the Iranian government, if you don't stop using violence against your people, we're coming after you and you're not going to know what's going to hit you. So what is the American response going to be? So I want to break down a couple options. The first option, which might surprise people, is that the United States doesn't need to attack. And I want to explain why. The United States, especially the armed forces, in this last conflict with Venezuela, they showed how superior the American armed forces are to any other fighting force in the world. And I want to break that down for a second. People might think that to fight a war, you really have to launch the jets and drop the bombs. But if everyone in the world saw a week ago, 2 weeks ago, depending when the attack happens, when they saw American forces engaging with a country that has very deep financial pockets, who spent, according to foreign reports, over $2 billion on air defense systems, who has the best of Russian intelligence, Russian anti-aircraft missiles and intercept systems, so the radars and the control centers, etc., that go with them. And the United States, in an operation that lasts 2 hours maybe, is able to eliminate everything, to fly under the radar, to eliminate the anti-aircraft defense systems, the best of what the Russians have to offer, the best of what the Chinese industry has to offer, and they do so with no casualties to the American side. Well, everyone around the world, by the way, we're talking about Venezuela, of course, and the Maduro, let's call it extraction from Caracas, Venezuela to the United States, that shows everyone around the world, and Iran first and foremost, this is what we're able to do. And if you go against us, we're able to strike, we're able to have intelligence on the ground, we're able to have air superiority, intelligence superiority, complete control of the skies and everything that goes on it, both in, let's call it, in communication, in radar systems, and in just line of sight fire control, complete control of your skies in a matter of hours. This is what we're able to do. So that's, I think, scenario number one. What happened in Venezuela was a show of force for the Iranians and a show of force for the Chinese and the Russians of, this is what it looks like when the American armed forces are coming after you. And people in Iran, and I believe this has already happened, are looking at that and saying, I'm not sure we want to engage with this level of military capability. What we saw back in June in Operation Midnight Hammer, or Rising Lion, as Israel called it, in Iran, that was just a precursor of what the United States armed forces can bring down on Iran if they truly want to attack and bring down the government. And that might be enough to convince the government to work hand in hand with the Trump White House and have or a series of reforms or a government change that brings an end to the violence against the protesters and an end to the internal conflict or pressures that brought forth these conflicts. But there's another option. That option is that the United States does attack in Iran. And when it does so, it's going to do so with all the might of the armed forces positioned and stationed outside of Iran. We're talking about the carrier strike groups, we're talking about the bombers that once again will be positioned around the region. Diego Garcia, remember that name from back in June? In islands throughout the area, in the UAE, in Qatar, in different sites. Everything that the United States knows how to bring to bear that needs to come back to this region. And when it does, it could be a matter of minutes, hours before the Ayatollah regime is completely over. But there's another third option. The option is that no violence is needed, is that the protesters are able to throw or remove the government on their own accord without the US having to even intervene. And I want to say something else. That third option might already be in play, and it probably already involves several intelligence organizations and aid from outside of Iran that is trying to help the people inside fight against a dictatorial and a violent regime that has been torturing them for 47 years at this point. So let's wrap up the options here. There's a lot on the table right now. The Iranian regime has been using extreme violence against its own people. The protesters on the ground in Iran have had the support of the Trump White House, who's promised them publicly several times that help is on the way. But that help hasn't come yet. And now it's a question of what tool will the United States use to stop the demonstrations? Because we've seen that Trump has been true to his word time and time again in stopping demonstrations or acting when it comes to geopolitics and the use of force against other countries. We've seen him just in the last week do exactly that in Caracas, Venezuela. So it's not a question of can they or will they, it's a question of what step will be used. Will it be a limited strike? Will it be a full strike? Will it be something where the Iranians understand that they need to back down and have some kind of series of reforms? Or will the people in Iran manage to overthrow the regime or destabilize the regime to the point where they're no longer an issue and the government is replaced? The next, let's say, 7 to 10 days are going to be very, very substantial in the history of this region and what happens to the people of Iran and what happens to the next step in this region. This is something you should be praying for. This is something you should be following. And here at TBN Israel is the best place to do exactly that.
So thank you very much, Mati. It looks like we are facing a nerve-wracking week. And here at Boots on the Ground, we will report every day on what's happening here, what's happening with Iran, what's happening in this region, because it matters to you wherever you are around the world. Now, we'll move to Gaza, because last Thursday, a Hamas terrorist cell that received authorization to search for the fallen hostage, Ran Gaveli, opened fire on nearby IDF troops. The firing broke out in a stormy weather, including rain, fog, and low visibility. And within minutes, it turned into a long battle as tanks and combat engineering troops engaged the terrorists at close ranges, but 200 meters apart from each other. After 4 hours of fighting, 6 terrorists were eliminated. The incident sends a signal that Hamas is testing the limits of the ceasefire agreement, but every such violation on the ground creates a fast slope back to a broad confrontation between the IDF and Hamas. For instance, following the incident came a settling of accounts. During the week, in cooperation with the Shin Bet, the IDF eliminated 5 key operatives from Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad terrorist organizations, including Muhammad Hamed Mahmoud El-Khuli, the commander of the operations department in Hamas's central camps. Asaf Adman Muhammad Khatib, the commander of the rockets and the missiles array in the central camps area in Palestinian Islamic Jihad, also met his end like this, along with Said Khaled Ali Abdel El-Rahman, who's responsible for the snipers in the Dir el-Balach battalion, and 2 additional operatives who worked to rebuild the organization's infrastructure in that same area were also removed from the battlefield, and the IDF emphasized that this is a direct blow to the ability of the terrorist organizations to plan and to harm the forces deployed in the sector. And from here, we move to Phase B, as Israeli officials are insisting on Hamas disarmament, and according to the political outline advanced by the United States, Hamas has received a limited window of time, just 2 months, for full disarmament from the moment an alternative civilian mechanism is established. The American message is clear. They can do it the easy way or the hard way. Well, Israel says this is not a declarative goal, but a condition for any progress. And with that in mind, the IDF is already preparing plans for a scenario in which Hamas does not disarm voluntarily, but in parallel, there is planning that speaks of Israeli control in defining the demilitarization, including what a criteria will be, how to check, and what counts as real disarmament. However, all of this is being overshadowed by the American composition for the oversight and implementation bodies of the next phase, including names from Turkey and Qatar. And in Israel, this sparks a public debate. But one thing must be said clearly: even when there is public disagreements and friction, the security political coordination remains tight. There are those in Israel who say that composition of the so-called Committee for Peace was known in advance and did not come as a surprise. And there is also an American response that clarifies that Israel was aware of the structure of this committee. The debate is less about is there a coordination and more about where red lines are drawn inside that coordination. However, in the defense establishment, the big concern is that Qatari money is playing far too big of a role in determining the composition of this peace committee and many other aspects of this situation. For instance, the IDF warns that the flow of cash into Gaza could roll back to Hamas even if it starts under the title civilian. The explanation underground is very simple. Materials, money, and distribution systems for humanitarian supplies can very quickly become military infrastructures. So the bottom line is that underground Hamas is trying to stretch the rope with fire and violations, and in the defense establishment, they are closing circles and preparing the next step, real demilitarization, or an operation that will impose it. And the question already hovering is not only what will happen in Gaza, but where the next front will open. So let's switch our focus to the northern arena, because Hezbollah is looking at crumbling support from Iran and coming under increased pressure themselves, both from within Lebanon and also from outside. IDF strikes in southern Lebanon have returned to the agenda recently after a period of relevant quiet. Targeted hits and also clear messages, and Hezbollah is feeling the pressure on the border and also behind it. This matters because if Iran is shaken from within, its strongest proxy in Lebanon suddenly remains without a stable back, and in such a situation, every spark in the north can turn into a big event. Hezbollah has been under intense pressure in recent days as Israeli strikes mean ongoing attrition of the capabilities that they still have, while on the other hand, there is tense within what Washington wants to do with Tehran in the Islamic Republic. There is the possibility that in any American-Iranian agreement, the central demand will be to reduce the activity of Iran's regional arms, starting with Hezbollah in Lebanon. From the organization's perspective, this is a scenario that endangers it politically and also endangers its military and terror abilities at the same time. And inside Lebanon, the line is also becoming sharper. Lebanese Foreign Minister Yosef Rigi said publicly this week that as long as Hezbollah's weapons are not finally dismantled, Israel has the right to continue striking. This is a sentence that marks a change of the atmosphere in Beirut. And in response to all of this, Hezbollah Secretary General Naim Qassem sent an implied threat to Israel, saying that aggression towards Lebanon cannot continue. We have the right to defend ourselves. He repeated the refusal to disarm and attacked the foreign minister, claiming it is inciting hatred. And at the same time, Qassem aligned with Khamenei's line and accused the United States and foreign agents of involvement in the violence against protesters in Iran. And meanwhile, President Trump is playing soft and sophisticated diplomacy, but the strategic message is clear. Hezbollah may be required to make heavy concessions, but for its part, the IDF is continuing to prepare for intense actions against Hezbollah if diplomacy fails. So to sum up, Iran is shaken, Hamas is violating understandings, and Hezbollah is being pushed into a corner between Beirut, Washington, and Jerusalem. Israel's home front is preparing as best we can, cleaning out bomb shelters, taking first aid courses, buying bottled water and canned food, and bracing for whatever comes next. And amidst all of this, it is once again raining hard in Jerusalem today. That's why I'm recording from our studio here in this country. So I'm beginning to wonder if I should start building an ark for my family. But jokes aside, it is wonderful to have so much rain here in this country, because I remember that in Iran, they are still in a severe drought. So thanks God for providing the rain. And the question that leads us to end is this: when these three arenas heat up together, what are we praying for? Are we praying for our leaders, for our soldiers, for the civilians of Israel, and all our neighbors? The answer is yes, yes, and yes. So join us in prayer for wisdom to our leaders, to your leaders, for the IDF soldiers defending us now on multiple fronts, for the people of Iran to have better leadership, to have a future. Let's pray for God to fill the hearts of our enemies so that instead of hating the people of Israel, they would love us. God can make that happen. Let's pray for the peace of this region, for the peace of the people of Iran, Lebanon, Yemen, Syria. Let's pray for the peace of Jerusalem.